Esteemed council members, my name is Nate Looney. I'm a native Angelino and a U.S. Army veteran, and I'm also Jewish. I currently serve as the Director of Community Safety and Belonging at the Jewish Federations of North America. As a man, a transgender man,
with my work, what I try to do is take a piece of my law enforcement experience of both what it means to be law enforcement domestically and abroad, the different lessons that I've learned from both of those fields, and what it means to move through the world the way I do today as who I am. And so part of my work is to use all of that to inform the strategies around how to secure our community in a way that is inclusive of all. I work for Jewish Federations of North America, which is an umbrella organization that supports local Jewish communities in 148 locations around North America, including the United States and Canada. My work is on our Jewish Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, the JEDI team. What our work is specifically within my team is to create a culture of belonging for all Jews and their loved ones. And what that looks like is creating educational opportunities, engagement, and empowerment initiatives for folks holding marginalized identities, primarily Jews of color, LGBTQ+ Jews, recognizing the diversity of observance levels within our Jewish community, English second language or non-native English speakers. A lot of the work that we do is just to change the way and prepare for that community of the future, Jewish community of the future.
Since I first met Nate, I was really blown away by his generosity and spirit. Through his years of dedicated service to the community, his military service, these really demonstrate a character of high caliber that just keeps on giving. And when I think that Nate has done so much and he can stop, he's just getting started. I'm the founder and CEO of JQ, and JQ is an LGBTQ and allied Jewish organization. Today, Nate's a board member at JQ, which means he's one of our highest level volunteers. You know, when I first met Nate, he was a very shy, soft-spoken human being, and his generosity really shined through, but getting to know what a dynamic human being he is and what an amazing leader he is would take time for me to get to know him.
Within our JEDI team, I work on Live Secure. Live Secure is a safety and security initiative, and my work with that initiative is to ensure that our safety and security practices are inclusive, that we are ensuring that our security staff and personnel, both paid and volunteers, understand how to move in the most culturally competent way to ensure that everybody feels a sense of belonging.
JQ and the Jewish Federation are partners in serving the community, and together we're able to build LGBTQ Jewish safe spaces, provide leadership opportunities and support services. And on a national level, part of Nate's work has been to make sure that JQ is in national conversations around LGBTQ inclusion, but also to make sure that our support and wellness programs, which are life-saving services, are brought out to Jewish institutions across the country.
A lot of what pushes me in the work that I do is not for myself. It's recognizing that a lot of the work that I'm doing now, I may never see the benefit of it. But God willing, if I were to ever have kids, I wouldn't want my kids to experience the things that I've experienced. And I wouldn't want future hypothetical grandkids to have any sort of awareness of any of the struggles that I've been through, because I know what it feels like to be met with that higher degree of scrutiny unnecessarily. I think a large piece of what pushes me towards changing the narrative around community or changing what we think of when we think of what community looks like is more than anything else really to ensure that our future generations experience a different life.
You know, Nate has been such a dynamic player on a national level, but the truth is really what he's done for JQ on local level and our community building space has been profound. He brings his insight of all of the different identities he's able to touch, but also his thoughtfulness around being an educator. And that shy individual really rises to the occasion, has helped us build dynamic educational experiences, helped us think and curate who are the right speakers to put in front of an audience, and helped us design a program that really engaged community members and really lifted them up and really made them feel like they had a safe space and a home and a community that they belonged in.
The Live Secure initiative is intended to strengthen security infrastructure for Jewish organizations. And so for me, as somebody that holds multiple identities, I have both that internal, intimate knowledge of what it means to be part of a targeted community, while also balancing that knowledge of what it means to be responsible for securing a community. So that's really how the LGBTQ work comes into focus as it relates to safety and security. I was born and raised primarily in Los Angeles. I come from a diverse family. So my mother's side of the family is from Panama. My dad's side of the family is from the South. So when I think about my childhood, it was family gatherings with both sides of the family. There being salsa and merengue playing, different types of music. My dad's Baptist. My mother is Episcopalian. So I think my Jewish journey has looked very different. I mean, everybody's Jewish journey looks different. But my Jewish journey in particular started when I was about 13. I was having an after-school conversation with a very good friend, and we were talking about religions. And he said, well, just become Jewish. And my response was like, I can't become Jewish. There's no such thing as a black Jew. And it's funny because like today, when we think about who is Jewish, oftentimes the thought is that everybody's Ashkenazi of European descent. The person I was having this conversation with was Iranian in descent. So it's like from one marginalized Jew to now another marginalized Jew. Back when I was 13, this conversation of course you can be Jewish, just be Jewish. But once I got out of high school is when I started seeking out the synagogues that I wanted to go to. While my journey started when I was 13, it's an ongoing process of discovery and rediscovery of what being Jewish means for me today. I graduated from high school and went to college and did 1 year, and more than anything else was a little bit bored with being on a college campus, and had always wanted to serve in the military and saw it as an opportunity to shift gears. Not everybody can say that they've served, and that was something that really appealed to me, is just being a member of a small group of our population that supports safety and security of our country.
I think that Nate is uniquely qualified to think about safety and security for our community, largely from his experience in the military.
I think that being a young person during Hurricane Katrina, being a young soldier, I had a different lens at that time. I was in the Louisiana National Guard at the time as a military police soldier, and the National Guard supports local law enforcement with evacuation efforts prior to a hurricane. And my unit was part of that sort of support response. And so essentially what ended up happening was my group went from Jackson Barracks after the levees broke to the Superdome. And so it was a really interesting time, because to be a young soldier and see the impact of a major event like that on sometimes people that I even knew was something that stuck with me my entire life. There was a real sense of community safety or community building, and it kind of set a tone because you're still able to find the humanity to help someone else. So there was a lot of that. Somebody coming in from the water and another person helping them bring their belongings in. Or I had the opportunity to hold a newborn baby that had been born during the hurricane. So it really showed the span of humanity and what it looks like to stand up for a complete stranger. And I think that's something that I think about today, you know, and how I move through the world. After we finished with that, my unit went to Iraq. You know, I really credit my time in the military with informing how I move through the world now. My worldview is completely different after experiencing being in another country that's engaged in a wartime environment. You'd get ready to roll out the gate and the unit in front of us would get hit. Or we'd get through the gate and the unit behind that was coming in behind us would get hit. And so, you know, your sense of safety is different. There's a delicateness to life. And I felt it more when I was in the Middle East and when I was in Iraq than when I was in New Orleans.
I think that Nate draws upon the experience of being in the military and the National Guard to think about safety and security through a lens of also understanding his own experience as an individual of color and as a transgender Jew.
Even before I got back from Iraq, I was already clear that my gender transition was something that was on the horizon. I did my process here in LA. And it's not something that you can wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to transition, and then immediately have a prescription for testosterone or anything like that. It takes months, months of initial therapy before I could even access hormones. One of the most significant memories that I have of that time period of transitioning was when one of my great aunts started using my chosen name. And I was like, how is it that someone that's in their 70s or 80s is able to get this and figure it out? I was expecting it to be some sort of like big catastrophic conversation when I called my father. I was really, really nervous about telling him. And he just kind of was like, okay. Like, I kind of already had that idea. I just was waiting for you to come around. And I was like, well, that was underwhelming. His biggest concern was about my personal safety.
You know, what an individual goes through when it comes to gender identity and transitioning can be different for each and every individual. What that looks like and how that manifests. And the most important thing is that we're able to see people and identify them for how they wish to be seen and identified.
BCC, Beth Chaim Hadashim, is the world's oldest LGBTQ synagogue. It was probably one of my first landing spots when I got out the military. First thing I did was find my Jewish community, and that's where I landed. And I think that synagogues like that are really important for Jews that may not have support at home. And so it's crucial to have spaces like that so that there's a place to celebrate the wins. You know, I think during the AIDS epidemic, synagogues like BCC were the main ones doing funerals for people that died from AIDS and HIV-related illnesses when their own people from their families weren't showing up for them. So it's a really important piece of not only LGBTQ Jewish history, but what it means to create a place where people feel like they belong and can be their authentic selves.
I would say that, you know, Beth Chaim Hadashim has done groundbreaking work in supporting young trans community members, and through our partnership with JQ's trans programming, we have been able to offer a whole host of annual programs in partnership that have really reached larger numbers as a result.
One of the things within the North American Jewish community that we are always concerned about is the sense of belonging and ensuring that everybody feels like they belong in our community. And when someone is misgendered or seen as not Jewish, they might only go to that synagogue once and never go back again. And so what does that do to the strength of our Jewish community as a whole? So community building is really important to me in that I love people and I love being around people. And I find for myself that I don't want to compartmentalize my identity. You know, it's not like I want to just go to one piece of the community to be able to be who I am as a Jew, and then go to another part of the community to be who I am as a black man. The utopia that I dream of is one in which we can all be all of ourselves all the time.
So community building is the opportunity where we can bring our community members together and they have an opportunity to integrate their queer and Jewish identity. So they don't have to leave one piece of their identity at the door, or that their queer or Jewish identities need to be in mutually exclusive silos. Nate's a perfect example of that.
I think that to a certain degree, things that are just a part of who I am and my identity have become politicized. You know, when I'm talking about what it means to be able to use a public restroom, I'm not talking about something that's theoretical. I'm talking about the reality of it. Organizations like JQ International are extremely important, especially in times like this, where mental health is a huge concern. LGBTQ youth were really struggling and not being out and not being able to have any sort of outlet. So organizations like JQ International have a warm line for folks to call when they're in crisis. There's a concept in Judaism called pikuach nefesh. It's to save a life. And at the end of the day, what JQ is doing is saving lives. And in any way that their work can be amplified, I think is so important.
Nate's vision for the future is to make sure that each and every one of our queer Jews don't feel they need to compartmentalize the different aspects or facets of their identity. And through Nate's work with us, we've been able to foster stronger, healthier, more diverse, inclusive community programs, offer more dynamic education, and most importantly, make sure that we are there for supportive resources for community members in need.
We see that the LGBT community is also threatened. An example would be the mass shooting that took place in Colorado. In those moments, it was important to reach out to the Jewish LGBTQ organizations to ensure that they were also secured. The Live Secure initiative is intended to strengthen security infrastructure for Jewish organizations. A lot of the work that I'm doing at the Jewish federations within our JEDI team, our Jewish Equity and Diversity Inclusion team, actually includes programming where we bring in JQ International, organizations like Keshet or Sojourn to participate in educational programming to help educate the rest of the community. For me, as somebody that holds multiple identities, I have both that internal, intimate knowledge of what it means to be part of a targeted community, while also balancing that knowledge of what it means to be responsible for securing a community. So that's really how the LGBTQ work comes into focus as it relates to safety and security. There was a clear moment where I made the shift to working in the Jewish community. I was still consulting startups and working on some side projects. But with the murder of George Floyd, there was this big awakening and almost a sense of reckoning within our Jewish community around what do we do in this moment to support Black and brown people that are met with a degree of scrutiny and violence from our law enforcement professionals. And at that moment, I realized there was a real need from within our Jewish community to hear our voices and to understand that as much as it's important for our Jewish community to support non-Jewish Black people, recognizing that within our Jewish community, there were people of color that were having similar experiences.
I think that George Floyd was an inflection point in American history, where those of us who care about diversity, equity, and inclusion really said, we actually have a lot of work we really need to do, and we can't just passively think about it and hold it in our hearts and our minds, but we actually need to really shift our own behaviors, not just our attitudes, to make positive change for the future.
As a Jew of color and a trans person, I recognize that the same folks that commit anti-Semitic violence are also targeting my other identity points. Part of what draws me to this work is recognizing that, when people see me on the street, they don't know that I'm trans. But I recognize that there are other members of my trans and gender nonconforming community that, are met with hate and met with anti-trans related violence. In that same vein, when we look at anti-Semitic violence, it's on an uptick. We see it with attacks, like the attack on the synagogue in Colleyville. We see it in the media We see it on the signs hanging from the freeways here in Los Angeles. And for people that are Jews of color or that identify as Jews of color, there's a sense of being marginalized. It's really important for us to be creating community for ourselves that's culturally competent. So if I were to say there was a big goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal that I have, it's building bridges between communities that need to be together. I think we're coming into a very interesting time in our country, and community building across differences will be more important now than ever.
To me, it's very clear that Nate's vision is about celebrating the mosaic of each individual's identity, and that making sure that all Jews, regardless of who they are and like what they look like and how they're affiliated, are celebrated for their unique gifts.
I think that there's probably other things that I'll be involved in. I know that I see myself doing more of that sort of healing work within my marginalized communities. So not just within just the Jewish community, but within my Black community, within my Latino communities. So yeah, I can't really say I have a single easy goal to get to, and I've been advised to dream big and not set limitations on the goals that I set. The primary majority of my time is spent working within the Jewish community. It's been a journey to say the least, and it's a continuing to evolve and grow.